So good evening and welcome everyone. I'm Joanna. I am a librarian here at the Central Library and I'm a member of the planning group of Green in the City. So one of the books I wanted to mention tonight is called, and I have it here, is called Apartment Gardening. It's from an author who grows fruit, vegetables, herbs, and flowers in her one-bedroom apartment in and around it. So this book is available in our library as well as an ebook. And I'll leave that there for you. We also have a book called The Fruitful City. This one is about urban food forests, and these will be in the follow-up email you'll get tomorrow. So what we wanted to do before starting our program tonight, we'd like to take this time together to acknowledge that we in London, Ontario are speaking to you from the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Lenape, and Neutral peoples. This land is covered by several treaties, including Treaty 6, the London Township Treaty of 1796. We acknowledge historical and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples endure in Canada. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank the generations of peoples who have taken care of this land. Together and going forward, may we recognize our own responsibility in the stewardship of this land. If you would like to learn more about Treaty 6, the library holds materials on this and other treaties and land sessions. I'll include the titles of these books in the chat. Thank you, Leah. I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Joanna. And thank you everyone for joining us for Green in the City, Urban Agriculture in Your Backyard and Community. We're really excited to have you all here. And as Joanna mentioned, the London Public Library, the City of London, the City Symposium, and the London Environmental Network are all co-organizers of Green in the City. I'm Leah, I'm with London Environmental Network, and I'm going to dive into our introductions now. Okay, so after I do our introductions, we will hear from our main speaker, Natalie Boustead from FoodShare Toronto. Then we will break out into small rooms and talk about our discussion question for 10 minutes. And then we will hear from our speaker from the City of London, Vanessa Kinsley. And then we will hear from our local speaker, Jessica Cordes. And then we will have a 15-minute Q&A period. So throughout the session, please share any questions that you have with us in the chat, and we will address them in the Q&A period. So with that, I'm going to just introduce our speakers for tonight. So we will hear from Natalie Boustead from FoodShare. So Natalie is the CAMH Therapeutic Gardens Coordinator and Community Garden Lead at FoodShare. Natalie has experience as a teacher, an urban farmer, a community animator, and life coach. Since graduating from university, Natalie has found herself in all sorts of roles that fed her various passions, including being senior coordinator for Pact Grow to Learn, which is a schoolyard gardening and food justice organization in Toronto. Natalie has one foot in the food justice movement and one foot in the arts movement, and looks for ways where she can combine the two worlds wherever she can. Vanessa Kinsley has worked for the City of London for 12 years with positions in parks planning, environmental programs, in her current role as supervisor of the community gardens and neighborhood support with the Neighbourhood Children and Fire Services Department. She has a background in ecology and is passionate about connecting people to each other and their environment. When Vanessa's not working, she enjoys gardening and exploring London's natural areas with her husband and 2 boys. And Jessica Cordes is passionate about growing food at home and has been building her home garden for 3 seasons now. She learned the basics from her Italian grandparents and got to work transforming her lawn into productive gardens. As an active community member who cares about local food, Jessica volunteers with Friends of Urban Agriculture London, and the Middlesex London Food Policy Council. She believes that a sustainable food system is equitable, works with the environment, and builds the local economy. So with that, I'm going to invite our first speaker, Natalie, to share her screen and begin our first presentation of the evening.
Great, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Just give me a moment here to do my little screen share, and then I'll get started. Okay. All right, it's coming up. And if for whatever reason you don't see my screen, please let us know in the chat box, just so we know that it's all good, but I think it should be fine. Yeah, so thanks for being here. My name is Natalie, and I will be kind of chatting a little bit more about myself in a minute. But I'm going to be chatting with you today about FoodShare's Urban Agriculture Program. So giving you guys kind of an overview of what we do here at FoodShare with our own urban agriculture program, and hopefully inspire you as you think about what you can be doing in your local communities or wherever you kind of find yourself, whether it's in London or elsewhere. And so yeah, so let's get started. So first of all, you may not have heard of FoodShare, so I will just go over that quickly. So at FoodShare, we believe in good, healthy food for all. And so what that means in practical terms is we aim to center food justice in our work by collaborating with and taking our cue from those most affected by poverty and food insecurity. So specifically, Black, Indigenous, people of color, people with disabilities as well. And our goal is to inspire long-term solutions for a food system where everyone has access to affordable, fresh, nutritious food. And we reach over 260,000 people every year. So we have lots of different departments at FoodShare. So urban agriculture is just one of those departments, but it is not all of what FoodShare does. So we do have an affordable food box delivery program, which is kind of the heart of what FoodShare does. So delivering affordable produce to low-income communities. And then we have a whole other suite of things that we do as well, including job opportunities and kind of space and kitchen space opportunities for small businesses. We co-sponsor grants for smaller organizations. We do food policy advocacy with the City of Toronto. So we have a lot of staff, and we have a lot of different things that we do at FoodShare. So I'm just a part of the urban agriculture part of it, but we do have a broad scope. So yeah, so that's FoodShare. And then I always like to chat very quickly about myself, not because I'm vain, but because it's always nice, I think, sometimes when we see people in leadership positions, the way that they got there is kind of a mystery. And it's always nice to kind of demystify that, especially for young people. If you're looking to get into a certain industry, it's always really nice to know, how did the people that you're looking at as leaders in that industry kind of get there, right? So for me, I went to school to be a high school teacher. So I had a high school English teacher even. I had no dreams about being involved in urban agriculture at all. I had not stepped into a garden until I was probably 24, 25 years old. Okay, so it wasn't something that I had in my background. It wasn't something I had in my family. But when I left school, I was really dissatisfied with institutional education, but I loved teaching. So I knew that I wanted to do something different in order to use my teaching skills to the things that I actually believed in, and in ways that I really felt nourishing for myself personally and also for my community. So I recognized that I really was interested in environmental education. I always cared about the environment. I was an environmental activist, and I thought food might be a really good way for me to get involved in a really practical way in helping my community. So after school, I WOOFed, which is Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. So you go and you volunteer on a farm somewhere all around the world. It's in Canada, it's globally. So I did that in California, I loved it. And then I came back and did a craft farming internship, and CRAFT is an organization in Ontario that supports young people to do educational opportunities on farms. And I did mine in Guelph at Ignatius Farm, which is the kind of birthplace of where the craft farming internship program started. And I really felt nourished by that and really excited. And then I came back to Toronto And I landed my first job in urban agriculture the year after that, doing part-time work for a really small-scale organization called Pact Grow to Learn. And so that was just part-time. And so I had to side hustle jobs on top of that part-time work in order for me to keep that job and keep doing what I loved. So it wasn't always easy. I didn't have work in the winter time with that job, so I had to figure out wintertime work, and then I had to supplement my income. And I did that for about 4 years. So this is me in my like late 20s, kind of trying to side hustle, figure it all out. I took a break for 2 years to like just stop hustling so hard. And then when I wanted to come back into it, I got another part-time job with FoodShare Toronto, and it took me another year of working there before I got into a full-time leadership position in urban agriculture where I am now. So all in all, it took me around 6 years before I really was able to get into leadership role, right? So it doesn't just happen to people. They don't just step into that stuff. There's all these stages. And so I just really always like to point that out for folks that are interested in getting involved and they don't know where to start. This was my path. It won't necessarily be yours, but it's always nice to see the path of folks who are now in leadership positions representing this industry, right? Okay, so enough about me. I'm going to talk to you about FoodShare Community Growing Food Team's 3 sites. Okay. Oh, it looks like someone's scribbling by accident, I think. So we've got 3 different sites going on at FoodShare. So one is the Sunshine Therapy Garden, which is one thing that I manage. So the Sunshine Therapy Garden is a partnership with CAMH. And so we've had that partnership since 2002. And for those of you who don't know, CAMH is the Center for Addictions and Mental Health in Toronto. So this garden is specifically for CAMH patients, inpatients and outpatients to enjoy. It's not a full-on production garden, so the goal is not to just produce as much food as we can. The goal is to enjoy our time in the garden. The goal is to learn about food and just really be in community with people in a natural setting, learning some things, but we don't have any financial pressure in our program to produce a certain amount of food. And that's a really important thing, because if we had to meet some deadlines or we had some funding goals that were associated with producing in the garden, that adds this level of stress, and then it no longer becomes this just fun, easy thing. If our crops fail, doesn't matter, it's all just learning, right? So we have a weekly market stand outside CAMH where our clients sell the produce and get to have experience, working with the public, which is great. We also do a year-round greenhouse operation on site at CAMH. And we're one of the only organic gardens on mental hospital grounds in Canada. So we are looked to as kind of a model for what's possible. And, even if folks aren't necessarily part of the program and actively, physically in the garden with us doing the work, it's open and accessible for the community to come in and enjoy. So it's not fenced. People take their walks there. People from the community who are not CAMH members feel great coming in there and walking around with their dogs and their children. So it also is this kind of entry point, or this nice connection point between CAMH and the surrounding community, where everybody kind of comes and enjoys and feels safe to do that, which is really nice. So that's what I work on, and that's what I love to do. And it combines my my skills around mental health and well-being with my gardening skills and my teaching skills, which I love. So here's some photos of the greenhouse that we run. So this greenhouse was paid for by CAMH. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about, the benefits of partnering with large-scale organizations and also the drawbacks. But certainly a benefit is that we got this big, beautiful greenhouse that we run full-time. And in the wintertime, me and the clients will grow indoor houseplants and tropicals, which we sell to CAMH staff, which you see here in the photo as well. So every year we do a big Christmas green houseplant sale, and that's always really fun. And we do another one in the springtime. So we're always producing something. And during COVID, we are taking the opportunity to shut down the greenhouse for a few months and just turn the heat off and do a big clean. Because when you keep a greenhouse running 24/7 and all throughout the year, what happens is that you attract a lot of pests and diseases over time. So it's really good to shut it down, turn the heat off, let it have a freeze period. That's going to kill off a lot of any pests and diseases that might be present. So the silver lining for me of COVID is that I am going to get some time to shut down the greenhouse, but generally we are running programs all year round, which is really nice and the benefit of a greenhouse. So here's some more photos of our garden. We also grow flowers, and we've been selling flowers to the local, to some local stores, which has been really great and a nice source of income. Again, we're not dependent on that, but it is just a nice addition. And we also have lots of interesting fruit bushes and berry bushes we grow on site. So here's Jamie, my right-hand man, with some gooseberries from our gooseberry bush patch, which is lovely. And the middle photo is us harvesting garlic. So the next one that we have, and this is a fairly new site, so we're only in our 3rd year with this site, is BCI, or Burnhamthorpe Collegiate Institute. And this is a 2-acre farm on TDSB property. So this is a really amazing site. We've done a lot with it, thanks to Adam, who is pictured here on the left. So this BCI 2-acre farm is youth-led. It's located in an under-resourced community of Rexdale, which is in the west end of Toronto. It provides educational opportunities for youth at the school, as well as surrounding community. There are summer jobs available for youth. So we employed approximately 20 youth in 2019. 2020 has been a weird year because of COVID. We still got around to being able to hire youth, but we didn't get the same numbers because we weren't able to have the same numbers because of a weird year. But in general, we grow about 40,000 pounds of organic produce on this site, which is pretty amazing. And this was, you know, for the most part, an underused site that used to be an old football field, but was not really being used anymore for that purpose. There's also a weekly market stand, and the food stays available to and within the local community. So in previous years, FoodShare had other programs where the food was being taken out of the site and being sold at farmers markets to kind of rich or wealthier people at regular farmers markets. And we wanted to stop that and keep the food within the community that we were trying to service and make sure that that food and produce was affordable. So they have hundreds of people coming from the community every week to buy this produce at an affordable rate. And another thing that we do, which I'm going to talk about, is a compost bucks program, which also made it more affordable for folks in the community. And there's also, so the compost program, which I'll talk about in a second. So here is some photos of the garden. So the folks on the top left here are people from the community coming out for a community harvest day. So they get to come and harvest themselves and take produce home right from the garden, which is so nice and so satisfying for community members. And at the bottom here, we have our youth participants who are learning about how to grow and also being employed and being paid for their labor, which is also a really important thing, especially if you're working with marginalized folks and folks that represent some kind of BIPOC group. It's important for us to think about the history of, how those bodies have been used in agriculture and make sure we are paying whoever we're working with a good wage for the work that they're doing. So we strive to do that all the time. Another thing that we do at the site is have a huge compost system, which is fed into by the community, which I'll talk about in a second. So this is an abandoned tennis court. There's a lot of tennis courts in and on Toronto District School Board property that are no longer used. They're being overgrown. You can kind of see on the left here, there's lots of plants and stuff that were growing through the concrete. But this is an ideal place to do composting because it's a fenced in area. So we don't have huge critters being able to kind of get in there as easily as they might if it wasn't fenced in. You can never fully avoid critters when you're doing compost, but like it certainly takes that down a notch. And we produced enough compost here to cover the entire site for BCI the next year, which is pretty incredible. And so this is one of our favorite things that was initiated by some of our staff here at FoodShare, which is called Market Bucks, which is a compost exchange program. So the basic premise is that community members bring their compost buckets from their households to the market stand every week, and they get a certain amount of market bucks that they can spend on produce at the market stand every week. And so especially for low-income community members, this is a way more dignified way to offer something in exchange for something else, as opposed to just getting a handout, which a lot of people feel a lot of shame around and don't feel really good with that model. So in this situation, they're actually giving us something super valuable in the form of food scraps that we use in our compost piles on site to then nourish our plants for next year. So it is a really meaningful, valuable exchange. And then they are getting food back for that meaningful contribution to our program. So this has worked really well. About 150 families participate in this every week. And what we get out of it is amazing, beautiful compost that is really an essential part of how we grow the food. So everybody wins in this scenario. And FoodShare is going to be spreading this model around over the next couple of years, because it really does work so well, and it's such a dignified way for folks to access food. The third project that we have is just starting now. So we just got access to the land kind of last year, and then we wanted to do a bunch of stuff this year, but then COVID happened, but also there's a lot of red tape, even though we got permission, as you know, I'll talk to you about in a little bit. But so Flemo Farm is Toronto's first hydro corridor farm. So it's about an acre of land on a hydro corridor, and this is located in Flemington Heights, which is another under-resourced community, this time in Toronto's East End. So in terms of where we have situated our sites, we've been very specific about that we want to do these projects in some of the most underserved communities in Toronto. So we have Rexdale in the West End, Flemington Heights is in the East End, and then the Sunshine Garden is kind of centrally located at the mental health hospital. So this is a partnership between FoodShare, Hydro One, and the City of Toronto. So there's a lot of people involved in making this happen. So this site is going to offer mentorship training and tools to 5 community farmers to start their own farm-based businesses, as well as having regular community garden plots. So some people from the community will just go in and grow their own food and have, you know, an 8-foot by 8-foot garden bed, but then we're going to offer a quarter-acre space for up to 5 farmers who want to actually make an income off of the land to be able to have access to do so, and they'll have access to a business mentor as well as a farm mentor, and we will also provide them with tools and equipment so to get them started, because a lot of that is often really prohibitive, and we want to make sure people are successful. We don't want to create barriers for that. So we don't want to just give them the land. We're going to give them the training. We're going to give the tools and equipment for them to be successful. So here's my manager Orlando at the site this year. So this was in the fall, or like kind of late summer. We finally got access to all the things we needed. We got through all the red tape. And so we were able to lay down some black tarp. So this is a process called occultation, and this is what you do, or what you can do, if you want to kind of kill off the grass underneath and kill off any weeds. So you're heating up the ground, you're killing the grass off, and then we're going to go in with a rototiller and we'll plow that site. But so we're still in the beginning phases of that, but it's coming along and it's very exciting. And I'm sorry, I will get to your questions. I don't know if you have questions. I can see a little chat box going off, but I'll answer them towards the end just so I don't lose my train of thought. So in addition to all these, we also do have a compost program. So we build 3-bin composters and give them out to community gardens that request them. And alongside that, we also offer advocacy and training around how to compost properly, because composting is such a huge and critical part of gardening and farming. And so we try to promote that as much as we can and make sure that as many community gardens across the city get these 3-bin composters as possible. We also, in terms of advocacy, City of Toronto and different community groups, sometimes in the past and ongoing, have real issues with allowing community gardens to have compost bins on site, even though it is such a critical part of gardening. And so we try to do as much advocacy as we can to allow municipalities to say yes to compost. And part of that is by showcasing that we are doing proper training and that people have proper hygiene rules around how they keep their compost bins. So that's really important because people don't want the critters, they don't want, any kind of smell, all of that stuff that people are afraid of. So we try to advocate for compost in the city because it is so important. So then I also wanted to talk to you about kind of the behind the scenes reality. So all of these slides look so fun, everything looks amazing, and it is, and that's very true. And there's all this stuff that it takes to make that stuff happen. So, so many of these projects took years for us to get approval. So with the BCI site and with the hydro corridor, both of those took about 5 years of advocating and kind of going back and forth with, the TDSB or Hydro One or the City of Toronto in order for them to say yes. And we had to keep jumping through many, many, many hoops. So just know that if you're interested and excited about a project and it doesn't happen right away, it's not just you. It is hard, hard, hard to get access to land in urban spaces for such a myriad of reasons. So one of the only ways to gain access to the amount of land that we have access to, so 2 acres, 1 acre sites within a city space, is to partner with large landowners and stakeholders. So it's partnering with the municipality or the city. It's partnering with the school district is usually one of the largest landholders in city spaces. So they're always a good one to try to partner with, but there's so much red tape. And you have to play by their rules. So you may have amazing dreams about what you want, but because their focus is so on liability, you have to really, really get clear on what your project is and work with what they need to see from their end in terms of liability to make it happen. You have to be doing lots of trust building to make it happen. You have to seem and be very legit and very thorough in what you are proposing. That is such an important thing, and you will probably have to go back to the drawing board many, many times because of those liabilities. And so another part is that even a large-scale organization like FoodShare doesn't always have the resources to staff adequately, and staff members experience burnout. So farming, as much as it's a beautiful, amazing experience, is a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and it's work that extends beyond 9 to 5. It's work that's weather dependent. There's just so many factors, and even we at FoodShare don't always get enough money and enough funding, even though we're one of the largest organizations that does this kind of work in the city of Toronto. We still find ourselves burning out with too much work on our plate because we just don't have enough staff resources. So that's the reality. And again, municipalities and stakeholders, their utmost concern is going to be liability. So you're going to have to really focus in on that and checking all their boxes if you're going to do something like this. So I just want to encourage you. I don't want you to shy away from any exciting projects you have. I just want you to really know that it might take more time than you want, and it is hard to maintain stamina as medium, small scale, or just individual residents to keep going and keep pushing past that 1 to 2 year mark when you're not seeing the results that you want and you're not hearing the yeses. But it can happen, and it does happen. And I want you to know that. But if it doesn't happen as soon as you thought you might get it done, I just want to encourage you to keep going. So benefits of partnering with a large group or bodies or large groups, bodies, or governments. There is a larger funding pool available for projects with multiple stakeholders. So if you partner with larger organizations or government bodies beyond yourself, you're going to have access to higher and higher amounts of funding. So that is always true. It's going to reduce the cost of having to rent land from private landholders. So we don't pay any rent on the land that we currently are using. So that is covered by those bodies that we're partnering with. There's potential coverage for things like utilities. So for example, CAMH pays for water for our garden and our greenhouse, and also heating for the greenhouse, which is thousands of dollars in savings. So we don't have to fundraise for those kinds of things. Those are just now built into what our partnership provides, which is awesome. There's going to be more media coverage and exposure if you work with larger organizations or multiple partnerships. And there's a larger amount of on-site insurance coverage. So those bodies may be able to cover the insurance, which again can be quite expensive for smaller scale groups or individuals. So partnering ensures that you have the insurance coverage you need to make your project successful and safe. And so just lastly, considerations before you start your own project like this. So maybe you're a small scale or medium scale organization, maybe you're an individual community group that wants to start something like this in your community or in your neighborhood or city. So start small, I would say, if you haven't had a history of doing this kind of work before. So funders often, especially big boy funders, they need to see you can execute your ideas on some kind of smaller scale before scaling up. So they usually want to see proof of concept before they give you the big bucks. And so if you haven't done something before like this, it's great to try to take a baby chunk or a baby bite off of a smaller project, prove that you can do it, prove that you can follow through and that you have the skills and that you can get the buy-in necessary from the community, for example, and then you can apply for the big bucks, right? So that's something to think about. Make sure that you scale up if you haven't done something like this before. If you've got some years under your belt doing similar kinds of projects, you're probably fine. But if you're starting from scratch, start smaller and work your way to that big dream of that 2-acre farm, if that's what you're thinking about. If you're attempting to do a project in a neighborhood or an area that's outside of your own community, research whether there are local groups already doing similar work and support their efforts instead. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel. A lot of us really get excited when we think we have this amazing idea, and I'm sure it is amazing, but there may be an organization or a group in the neighborhood or the area that you want to do that work that's been trying to do that work for a long time. And that neighborhood or that group may actually better represent that neighborhood and group than you do, and that's fine. That's not a problem, but it's good for you to recognize, especially if you're trying to go into a community that you actually aren't a representative of, but you want to support that community. Just check and see if you can do it with a community group that is already kind of there, maybe doing similar work or has been trying to do that work for a long time. So do your research. Make your project sustainable. So I mean, even FoodShare, we struggle with this, and we've been doing this a long time. So appropriate labor, appropriate funding, scope, and community buy-in. So a lot of these projects, a lot of urban agriculture projects, they don't have the sustainability over the long haul. So maybe they get funding for the first year, but they don't have a plan for their second year, and then it kind of falls apart and the project gets abandoned. Or there's a lot of excitement at the beginning, but there's not enough community buy-in to keep it going and be viable over years and years and years. And the sad thing about it is that the more years, like it takes a lot of years for the soil to get to the point where it's really going to be producing amazing stuff for you. So you really do need to have a vision for how you're going to sustain this year after year. And is it going to be you and your efforts alone? And if that is, like, that's pretty precarious if it's just 1 or 2 people really leading the charge. Not impossible, but it's great to have as many people actually really committed to this project. So bring as many community members into the process as possible, which is kind of what I was saying, and get as much buy-in and community ownership as possible. Also, make it fun and make it beautiful. These 2 elements are going to help ensure less vandalism and misuse of the space. So if the space looks cared for, it's going to attract a lot less vandalism in the first place. There's an urban planning theory called the broken window theory, which is once a building or somewhere like a house has a broken window, the value or the care for that space does not look like it's being invested in, and then it invites more and more misuse or non-caring of that space over time. And so this is true for community gardens as well. So if your garden doesn't look inviting or look cared for, chances are it's going to get vandalized a lot more than if it looks cared for. It's just psychology, I don't know. And making it fun too. So I know that there's a lot of community gardens that end up being really stressful, and a lot of people's stuff, because humans are humans, a lot of people's just human tension and human conflict comes into play, and it's no longer fun anymore, and it's no longer bringing people joy. It's actually really stressful. And so have some plans around how to build in some fun and community building. Have some plans around how you do conflict management if you are going to be the person that is the lead or taking the charge, because people's human stuff is going to come up. in these spaces, even though they're supposed to be these beautiful, serene, and productive spaces. They often can kind of fall into human chaos if people are not able to have ways to connect in ways that feel light and fun, and also have a common understanding of how you're going to resolve conflict, and a common understanding of what the expectations are in the space. So that's something to think about. And then ensuring staff and leadership reflects the community in which the project's taking place. So this is really important. Again, kind of tying into that second point, if you want to go into a community, especially if it's a BIPOC community and you are not from that community, you want to make sure as much as possible that you are having leadership in that community that is representative of that community. So that's really your work to do if you want to go in. And so the best thing is to partner with an organization that already exists there if it's outside your neighborhood zone or your community. And the next best thing is to hire somebody who represents that community. So yeah, those are my hot tips, and I think that is it for me. I don't know what time it was, and I hope I didn't go over, but I'm usually a pretty fast talker, so I'm probably fine.
Thanks so much, Natalie. That was fantastic.
All right. So, as Leah said, my name is Vanessa Kinsley. I work with the City of London, and specifically I work in an area called Neighbourhood Development and Support. My role, the majority of my role anyway, has to do with overseeing the Community Gardens program here in London. But aside from the Community Gardens program, our little team also oversees all kinds of neighborhood support type programs, including neighborhood equipment lending, the neighborhood movie night program, and several other initiatives that unfortunately were pretty much halted due to COVID-19 this year because of the gathering limits and the not wanting lots of people to get together, which is kind of what we do. So lucky for us, the Community Gardens program was going strong, so we got to keep doing that exciting work. So just to give you a bit of background, the Community Gardens program has been around really since about 1993 in London. It has not always been run by the city. In the past, it's actually been run by a few different organizations, including the Middlesex London Health Unit and the London Community Resource Centre. So the City of London started funding the program in 2006. So we were giving the funding to the organization who ran the program, the LCRC, London Community Resource Centre. And then in around 2011, the community came forward and really wanted to put a little more backbone into the program and to develop a strategic plan. So we went through a 4-year process between 2011 and 2015 to develop our strategic plan, which then we implemented over the next 5 years. And that was a really great thing to do, because through the development of that plan, it was recommended that the city actually take the program over, which I know a lot of cities, including what Natalie was just talking about with FoodShare, a lot of cities have other organizations running community gardens. However, here we oversee the program due to the fact that majority of the gardens in London are on municipal land, and we were providing a lot of the support to the program already at that point. So some of the benefits we learned about through the strategic planning process, I've listed up here on the presentation. I'm not going to read through those, but I did want to bring some of our findings to you from a survey we completed in 2019. So toward the end of the strategic planning period, we conducted a survey where about 200 gardeners participated throughout London, so all members of the Community Gardens program, and they told us some of their reasons for gardening and what they get out of gardening, and it really kind of brought us right back to those benefits of community gardening. So what we found was that 65 of all participants said that growing healthy and organic food was their top choice of why they had a community garden. The second overall reason people chose to garden was because they like exercise, so they want to be physically active in their garden. we found that 85% of all people chose their location because it was close to their home and in their community. So they had that neighborhood connection to their garden, as well as 22% of the survey participants also had friends within their garden. So they really like that social aspect. The third overall reason was the increase of emotional well-being. So again, for that improved mental health and stress relief of being in the garden. Most gardeners also like that they're benefiting the environment, and 1/4 of all gardeners chose their top reason as being in nature. So a lot of people like to be close to nature. And of course, all of the gardens on municipal land are in park spaces, usually surrounded by trees, sometimes on the river. So lots of connection to nature there for sure. Lastly, about 20% of participants say that they garden mainly to learn new gardening skills. So that's about 1/5 of all gardeners are out there to learn something new, which is really cool. So our program today, how it looks and how it's been for the last couple of years, since we've started overseeing the program, is that we only oversee programs on city-owned land. Of course, there are several community gardens all across the city on private land as well, but I'm not going to talk about those today. You can find resources on that online. I know the Friends of Urban Agriculture has some mapping for the gardens on private land, but I'll talk about our 18. So 16 of those are purely allotment style community gardens. So there's 464 plots in total across London, and they're in pretty much every neck of the woods, not in every single neighborhood, but there are gardens in every area of the city for sure. And the other 2 gardens are a neighborhood managed garden, which is brand new this year. And we also have a school managed garden in the Northwest. So the neighborhood managed garden is in Westlands Park. It's called the Petersville Community Garden. Just started up in 2020, like I said, and it's completely run by local residents. So there is a garden coordinator who oversees the garden administration, but really it is a communally run garden wherein the gardeners work together to communally garden a good portion of the land, and then they also have decided to split the other part of the garden into plots, so various families and individuals garden in their own space as well. So that's one of the advantages for sure of a neighborhood managed garden, is that they're able to decide how they use the land and how they want to split it up, and also they're able to kind of decide how they all contribute within that space, which is really cool. It's been very successful, and that was another thing that came out of our strategic plan, was that we are looking to promote more neighborhood managed gardens. So moving forward, actually, with any of our new gardens in the future, we are looking to have them all be neighborhood managed moving forward. Accessibility has also come out of our strategic plan as a priority that the community has really wanted to see within community gardens. So we make sure that we have that available for anyone interested in gardening, if they have a disability or if they have a physical limitation where they can't garden on ground in a regular garden plot. So we have 8 gardens with raised bed accessible plots. So that's on a hard surface for people to wheel up if they so wish. And then we also have the availability of standing raised beds if gardeners request those. So we've been working hard to make accessibility a priority in all of our gardens. We also found through our survey that there are at least 14 languages spoken within the program, which is really, really cool. And again, that's just through our 200 people participating in the survey. So who knows how many more languages might be spoken, but it is definitely a very diverse program. A lot of people are growing culturally significant food and food from where they've moved here from, which is also really cool because they're also teaching their fellow gardeners about different types of food and how to grow in different ways. Our steering committee is working really hard as well this year to make sure that all of our gardens are inclusive and welcoming spaces for everyone. So in 2020, I know Natalie mentioned that there were some challenges for sure. So what happened with us in the spring is, of course, everything shut down, as you all know, and community gardens was one of those things that shut down. So right at the beginning, when the province decided to close all park amenities, it also decided to close community gardens. Thankfully, Sustain Ontario, which is an organization based in Toronto, it's kind of an umbrella organization, was able to pull together partners from all over the province who were advocating for community gardening, and they got the province to reverse the decision. So as of late April, we were given the notice that community gardens were able to open for the season, which was excellent, and we got a lot of really positive, happy feedback from gardeners when that was announced. And we were able to open the gardens for May 2-4 weekend, so just in time to plant and be outside in the beautiful weather. The one benefit I would have to say that's come out of COVID and the fact that gardens have been made essential is that it's really one program that we know is going to remain consistent and essential, and we can plan for it and put a lot of work and effort into it. So this year we're doing a lot of work with the steering committee that I mentioned before and trying our best to make sure the gardens are as prepared as possible for next year and into the future. So the photo that you see up on the presentation is one of our sharing boxes and our bulletin boards. So right now we have 5 gardens with bulletin boards. We're installing 5 more this fall, and then we're installing enough to have one at every single garden next year. So every garden across the city on municipal land will have a bulletin board to post various garden specific and community information, and then also the sharing box, which are used really, really well to share everything from seeds to tools to harvest, extra harvest, all kinds of things. So I would definitely be remiss if I didn't mention some of the other urban agriculture projects that our team has gotten a chance to support over the years. So another program that we run is called Neighborhood Decision Making, and I'm not sure how many of you have heard of it before. It's been around for probably 4 years. I think this would have been our 5th year, including the pilot year. Unfortunately, that program couldn't happen this fall due to COVID, but we're really hopeful it'll be back in 2021, so keep your ears and eyes open for that. But what we've been able to do is provide funding to our winning projects through Neighborhood Decision Making, and those projects have included 3 food forests across the city, including the Wood Street Park Food Forest, pictured here on the presentation. We funded a fruit tree planting project around community gardens that was submitted by a local resident, as well as 2 fruit tree giveaways, also a project that won that a local resident and group implemented, which was awesome. So that was, I think, a couple hundred trees that got given away over the last couple of years. And then we also were able to support 2 installation of beehives in London, one with Lola, which is the London, Ontario Learning Apiary in Old East Village, and one at Buller Mountain. So some ways you can get involved if you are not a community gardener but are interested in becoming one. You can definitely register for the 2021 season, and that opens on January 4th. If you go to our website, which is listed there, london.ca, and search up Play Your Way, the registration will be through our recreation registration system, and that's if you're interested in a plot in one of the 16 gardens. If you're interested to get involved in the Petersville Community Garden, then you can email me at the communitygardens@london.ca email address, and I'd be happy to connect you with them. Of course, you can always also phone the number listed there, and somebody can help you over the phone. If you're already a gardener, which I know I saw a few names of people who are, you can join our steering committee, which is a group of really keen gardeners who meet at a minimum 4 times a year to discuss garden-wide initiatives. So we look at different things that affect all the gardens across the city, not just specific gardens. So the guidelines for the gardens, different projects that we might want to implement across the program, and workshops and that kind of thing. And then also you might want to become a garden ambassador, which is a garden specific position. So it's really being a welcoming and friendly face in the garden and helping to orient new gardeners, but also providing kind of a connection between the city and the rest of the gardeners. And then also I had to put up our info about the neighborhood decision-making program, because even though it is not running this year, as I mentioned, if you want to learn more about it or kind of keep in the loop about it, you're welcome to email our main email address at neighborhood@london.ca, or check back on our City of London website for 2021. So some other ways you can get involved in environmental issues and incentives within London is through our Climate Emergency Action Plan. So if you're interested to get involved and share some feedback this fall and winter, you can go to the website listed, getinvolved.london.ca/climate, or email climateaction@london.ca. And some other ways to get involved. Project Neutral, as you can see, that was mentioned at the beginning if you did the polls that were put up at the beginning. So that's how you get to the the carbon calculator through Project Neutral. And then there's also the My Wild Green Home virtual expo. And thank you very much for having me. I hope I did okay for time. I also could not see the time.
That's great. Thank you so much, Vanessa.
Thank you.
I will now invite Jessica to share her screen and begin her presentation.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Okay, that should be working. So my name is Jessica Cordes. I'm going to chat with you from a local perspective in London about urban agriculture in your backyard and community. A little bit about myself to begin. So I'm involved with a couple community groups to do with sustainable food. One is the Middlesex London Food Policy Council, and the other is Friends of Urban Agriculture London. I'll speak a bit more to both of these through my talk. I recently completed my Master's of Environment and Sustainability, and I work at Western University as the Sustainability Coordinator. I love to travel, I love to garden, and really believe in community work. So why urban ag? There are so many benefits to this practice, and I just wanted to share a couple of reasons why I believe it is so important. So food security and food sovereignty. Growing our own food enables us to have more control over the diverse range of foods that we can access and access to affordable foods. It helps protect us against insecurities, like, for example, COVID-19, or looking back to the World Wars and the Great Depression when governments encouraged urban agriculture as a way of food security. It's also a way to take climate action. It creates more green space in the cities, helps with carbon sequestration, building up the soil, habitat restoration and protection. We're building communities. As we've seen through these talks, it's a great way to build resiliency and networks amongst people. Physical and mental health are supported by getting out into nature, the labor of the garden, and access to healthy foods. And really overall, the foods that we grow ourselves taste amazing, and it gives us more access to a diverse range, not just the same tomatoes that we find in the grocery store all the time. So here's my garden. I'm in my third growing season, and I really wish I had a photo to compare of my first year when the plants were spread far too far apart. And every year there's new lessons to learn and new things to try out. Next year, I'm hoping to build upon a food forest that I'm really just starting to cultivate in another part of my yard, and also introduce some raised beds to my annual veggie garden here. One of the best parts of a garden is, of course, the harvest that you get to bring in, and getting creative with some of the things that turn out to be more abundant than others. And for me this year, that was Scotch bonnet peppers. I've got a freezer full, I've got hot sauce, and everybody I know is going to be getting hot sauce for Christmas. So sometimes you never know what you're going to pull in. With just 2 ground cherry plants this summer, I was having daily harvests, and it was my favorite thing in the garden. They were so delicious. I had never even tried them before growing them. I had never even eaten them. So that's a fun surprise of gardening too, getting to try new foods. This year, the City Council in London passed a new bylaw to permit home gate sales for urban gardeners to sell produce that was grown on their property. So I decided to try out this opportunity with a couple sales in August. It was a really fun way to meet neighbors. People love to learn about my garden, support local food, and support somebody who's growing food right in their own neighborhood. It helped to cover some of the costs of my garden, so purchasing seeds or plants or soil or whatever it is. It's a good way to maybe offset some of your costs, and also a way to distribute the harvest amongst the community outside of that small radius right around my house who always gets gifted in zucchini season or tomato season. Now I'm going to chat a little bit about some of the groups that I'm involved with that you can join as well and get involved with local food. So the Middlesex London Food Policy Council is a forum for residents and stakeholders to discuss local food issues and become involved with food system decisions. Council members represent different parts of the food system, from farming to production, consumption, food waste, education, nonprofit organizations. So we're currently accepting applications for the next council term. It's a 2-year term, 2021 to 23. If you're interested in being a part of building a sustainable local food system, I would definitely encourage you to check out the guidelines and application on the mlfpc.ca website and apply before November 15th. Now, if you're looking to get involved with the food system, but maybe aren't able to commit to a 2-year term, another great option is to volunteer. Volunteers are always welcome with the Food Policy Council with any skill set that you'd like to bring. We are especially looking for support with writing, storytelling, outreach, and organizing advocacy campaigns. So if you're interested in volunteering, you can email info@mlfpc.ca. Another group that you may be interested in is Friends of Urban Agriculture London, so FUEL for short. There is a very active Facebook group with nearly 900 people sharing resources, stories, questions, all about urban ag. FUEL has resources and opportunities for all skill levels, from beginner to expert. So you can get involved by checking out the website, where there are resources like recordings from a conference that was held in 2016 with excellent speakers all from around the region. Also information about seed swaps, plant exchanges, and sign up to the newsletter to stay updated on local policy changes, opportunities, and projects amongst the group. Soon we'll be opening nominations to join the executive committee in the positions for secretary, treasurer, communications, and observer. So I'd encourage you to join the Facebook group or sign up to the newsletter to stay updated. Now the next few slides show some photos of gardens in the community that I received from FUEL members, because I think it's really important to show that gardening is a diverse experience and there's not just one right way to do it. There's so many different ways. This one here is an elevated raised bed. Next up is a raised bed garden with a screen along the back. So on the right-hand photo, you can see that screen covered with beans a little bit later on into the season, the same garden. Here's an in-ground garden with a fence around it, kind of a similar structure to my own. This one is a mix of raised beds and in-ground beds. And then along the back, you can see some cool trellises. This gardener grew cherry tomatoes up there, but you might also try any kind of finding food like beans, even melons. And what I've seen is using nylon or those mesh bags that onions typically come in, and those can be used to cradle the fruits as they grow and get heavy. Here's a great example of raised beds in a protected structure that can be converted to a greenhouse for season extension. This one on the left, there's pallet beds with lettuces growing out, and strawberries are also grown this way by the gardener because it keeps the strawberries off the ground and protected. And on the right, we see the same garden with the pallets, the greenhouse in the back, and pollinator gardens. They all work together. Petersville Community Garden, here's another photo of what Vanessa was talking about, the community managed pilot project. I think this is an amazing example of community coming together to share the responsibility of a community garden, sharing allotment plots between individuals or group-led. As Vanessa mentioned as well, London has some food forests, which is amazing. Here's an example of the Wood Street Park food forest, but there are a couple others as well. Food forests are great. They're low maintenance systems of food production that are based on woodland ecosystems. So food forests incorporate perennial food sources such as trees, shrubs, herbs, vines, and perennial vegetables to create different layers in the forest and an ongoing source of food. To conclude, here are some tips and reminders of resources to help you get started on your own urban agriculture projects. So learn, start, try, buy, and plant perennials. You can learn by observing your space, learning from others in your community, find out what works in your area. You want to check out how much sun, water, wind is in that site where you'd like to start a garden. Start. I would also recommend just starting. Don't spend too much time learning and planning. It's always great to start small, learn as you go, and expand as you're ready. Try something new, learn from it, and keep moving on. Gardening is really an art form. There are just so many methods and designs that you can try and incorporate. To begin today, you could also buy some food from local urban farms and urban gardeners to support the local urban ag movement. And I'd encourage you to consider planting perennials in your food gardens, like fruit trees and nut trees, asparagus, berries. Perennials are an important source of food security. They require less maintenance over time and produce more food. So even though they may not pay off right away, over time they are a great incorporation. So thank you all so much. And also a big thanks to my grandparents who initiated my interest in gardening. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Now I'm just going to invite our speakers to get ready. We're gonna just rapid fire as many questions as we can in 5 minutes. So I'm going to start with a question from Brienne that was mentioned earlier that asks, what would be the biggest barriers to municipalities increasing the number of plots or garden spaces available? And I think that question will best be directed to Vanessa.
Probably. So yeah, we do have a process for starting new gardens on municipal land. At the moment, we have 2 gardens kind of in the queue. So we have 2 groups who are interested in new gardens in their neighborhoods. Of course, when you're doing anything on public land, I know that Natalie talked a lot about doing things on private land, which can be tricky also, but doing things on public land require a lot of vetting and a lot of community engagement and input. So the process usually takes at least a year to get a garden on public land. But honestly, like aside from that, I guess the biggest barrier would be the lack of available park space and even urban space in general. So we are definitely open to helping to support groups to get gardens on private land, and that's something that I think we'll be trying to promote more and more as the years go on, because parkland is definitely at a premium. I hope that answers your question, but we can chat more, Brianne, if you want later.
That's great, thanks. Another question that was asked earlier from Amanda Lynn, it says, I often worry about contamination in older sites. Do you test the soil to confirm the presence or lack of heavy metals, for example? I think this was mentioned when Natalie was speaking, so maybe if Natalie, you want to talk from your experience, and then Vanessa, if you have anything to add as well after.
Yeah, so for sure, soil samples are super necessary if you're going to start on a site that you're not quite sure what the history has been. And even in residential areas, if you've moved into a new place, whether you're renting or buying, if that is an older residence, you probably want to try to do a soil sample if you can, unless you're really sure of the history of it, because they used to use lead paint a lot in older buildings or on fences. So if it's kind of 50 years old or more, you really want to get that checked out. For us here in Toronto, I know that we send our soil samples away to the University of Guelph. It's about $40, and it'll come back to you in about 2 weeks. But 100%, if you're not sure, get a soil sample. And if you do know that your site has contamination, you can still go the route of raised beds and just like laying down a barrier between the raised beds and the soil underneath.
So I'll speak quickly just because to put it in a local context, if you're in London, we use a place called ANL Laboratories, which is actually just out on Crumlin Road, so near the airport, so right in town. And it's probably about the same length of time, like between 1 and 2 weeks to get the results back. But we do our basic soil testing that we do for every new community garden, includes heavy metals as well as a basic array of other things. And then if we know a site was either previous landfill site or close to a previous landfill site or has potential archaeological significance, we also do those tests as well, which are more involved and more expensive. But yeah, awesome. Hopefully on a residential property, you shouldn't need to do those things.
Awesome. And then we have a quick question that I'd like to direct to Jessica if you know the answer. The question is there a limit to the number of days you can sell from your house? Just wondering if you had that from personal experience this past summer.
Yeah, the bylaw is 20 times per year.
Awesome. Great. I think we're at 8:14, and I just wanted to share a couple more opportunities for people to get involved locally with environmental opportunities before the night is done. So I just wanted to share our Green in the City series is continuing. Next week, we're going to be collaborating with City Symposium to discuss responsible consumption and production. So please join us next week for that. And then we also have our finale on the 24th, and we're going to be talking about a green economic recovery from COVID-19 in the context of London, but we're going to be hearing from some great regional speakers as well. And now that it is 8:15, I will wrap up the night and say thank you to all of our speakers and all of our supporters here that support our work at the London Environmental Network. And a final thank you to everyone who came out tonight. Really appreciate you attending and talking all things urban agriculture with us. So with that, have a good night and thanks for joining us, and hope to see you next week.